Hi, it's Nabil and Gavin, and this is High on Retro, a podcast where two friends discuss 80s and 90s pop culture and the memories that made up their childhoods. How are you doing, Nabil?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks.
Excellent.
What are we talking about today, Nabil?
Well, Gavin, we're going to talk about something that's kind of special to both of us.
Ooh, what's that?
It's Jurassic Park, the
Oh,
first and original movie. It is indeed a classic.
banger.
And the reason why we're going with this movie is because this movie was responsible for us meeting.
It was? Really?
It was. So back in 1993, I was out on the front lawn playing with my Jurassic Park toys with my younger brother. And this kid with fiery red hair and freckles all over his face turned up, looked at us, and he went, "Oh, are those Jurassic Park toys? I got some of those." Ran back home and he brought them over to join us. And yeah, that started many a year of watching cartoons and playing with various toys, video games, and we've
A long and beautiful storied friendship.
Yeah,
You've got a good memory. Such a good memory. That's amazing.
that's the only memory I have of you, actually. The rest is
it? Yeah, the rest is just disappointment from now on.
It was downhill from that moment onwards.
So what do you remember about Jurassic Park? Do you like when it came out? What were you doing at the time and stuff?
So I can't remember, but were you huge into dinosaurs?
Oh, I was a massive dinosaur nerd. I remember there was a magazine that used to come out and it was just called Dinosaurs. And I convinced my parents to buy me every episode. And then it would come with like a little plastic T-Rex skeleton and you would build it. And then it would come with the skin and you put that on it in each episode. And then eventually you get a binder with all these like Top Trumps dinosaur cards. And I remember eventually as I grew up, one day my dad was like, "I can't keep buying you these silly dinosaur magazines." So as soon as I got to episode 100, he stopped buying them for me. But I had fond memories of it.
We'll have to do an episode on that because that used to be a thing, right? Because I remember that whole thing of you'd buy a magazine and you'd get a bit of something to build. And the first issue would be like super reduced. It'd be something like 99p. And then like every other magazine issue was like £5. So
like 50% of your weekly salary.
So what happened is by the time you complete the thing, you realize that it probably cost you like £1,000 just to put it
plastic
together.
T-Rex skeleton.
Exactly. And then another £100 on top of that for the skin once they decided that actually, you know what, they've made a lot of money out of this. They might as well keep going.
God bless the 90s.
Oh man, it was a different time. That was for sure.
Yeah. So do you want to get into it?
Yeah, so actually coming back, because I was definitely like huge into dinosaurs as well. And I remember like being super excited about this movie because I think it was the first time that when I saw the trailer, I remember going, wow, this actually looks like how we imagined dinosaurs to be. Like everything before then had been like this weird, not claymation, but the stop motion kind of plasticky, upright weird T-Rexes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, or just like The Land Before Time or something.
Yeah,
just like
or Denver the Last Dinosaur or something like that.
Fucking Denver. Oh my God, what a legend.
Barney. So yeah, like having something like Jurassic Park, which looked, way more realistic, it was just super excited. And I think that was the first movie I saw where I remember the queue for the cinema actually going outside of the cinema.
Oh God. Yeah, we saw it at the cinema as well, and it was the first time I'd ever been to see a movie at the cinema.
Really?
Yeah, I was 10 years old. Yeah, we just never went to the movie. To be fair, now I'm older and I've got my own kids. I understand why my parents didn't want to take two kids to the movies. But yeah, it was, and I remember coming away from it and just it like changed my life. I was like, this is incredible. But it's funny because the only thing I remember vividly watching in the cinema was the scene with Gennaro on the toilet. That's the only thing I remember about it. But yeah, what
a scene to remember.
What a time to be alive.
Indeed. It was one of the first films I saw twice. I loved it that much that I think it probably was the first film I saw twice. Yeah, other movies I'd seen at the cinemas before that, I think, was Home Alone 2, which wasn't as great as the first one. No. And Super Mario Brothers, which I remember going to see on my birthday. So
I will defend that movie to my grave. I will fight anybody who criticizes that movie.
You'll have to fight me then. That's for another episode.
Right, let's do it.
How can you defend that pilot?
I
Anyway.
don't know, dude. I think it's just because I was a kid and I loved it so much, and I refuse to acknowledge the very legitimate criticisms of it. Anyway.
Nostalgia. Well, that's the purpose of this podcast, right? It's for us to go back,
absolutely.
Look at these things, and see them with our adult eyes, and try and figure out why we liked something as a kid and why we might have changed our views.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff with it being like an 80s and 90s podcast. There's going to be a lot of stuff where we're like, oh, that's a bit problematic.
Things have changed in the world quite a lot since these movies were released.
Well, do you want to get into it? Should we start?
Yeah, I'm thinking. So I think the first thing we need to mention is there's going to be a lot of spoilers for both the movie and the book in this, obviously.
Yeah. So anybody who hasn't had a chance to see it yet.
Which actually, I did have a friend who hadn't seen it. She is.
Oh, really?
She's in her early 30s, and
she lives in a cave in
and I actually introduced her to Jurassic Park a year ago. So yeah, if she's listened to this podcast, well, yeah, I mean, she had my commentary on top of it. But the other problem is she didn't quite get this cinema experience. So that's she'll never truly appreciate what it's like to be in 1993 and see that movie on the big screen.
You're making me sad now.
I know. Yeah, so for those of you who have not seen it before, there's going to be spoilers, but watch the movie and then come back and listen to this, and we'll give you some insights into behind the scenes, what had happened during the making of the movie that we basically picked up from various sources, and also our thoughts on what happens in the movie. So if I remember the plot, it starts off with a guy called, well, it doesn't start with a guy, but there's a guy called John Hammond, who is the super rich philanthropist, would you say? He's just a rich old dude, right? Like, I don't think.
Yeah, just a rich old dude.
There's a rich old dude who has discovered how to clone dinosaurs, and he's basically created a park, which is a cross between a zoo and a theme park, on an island off the coast of Costa Rica. Now, during the building of a park, a worker dies in an accident, and John Hammond, the creator of this park, has a bunch of lawyers coming down hard on him. Now, the investors are getting cold feet because they're worried that the park is going to be shut down and is a health and safety risk. So they ask a lawyer by the name of Gennaro to go visit the park and to sign off on its safety. Now, the lawyer brings with him a chaotician. Chaotician?
Chaotician, yeah.
Chaotician. Why a chaotician? I'm not sure. Like,
I didn't even know that was a real thing that existed, but apparently it is.
So he brings along a chaotician to sign off on the park, and the investors also request a paleontologist.
Why? Why does he bring a mathematician?
He's not a mathematician. He's a chaotician. He makes that very clear in the movie.
Why is he there? Anyway, never mind. Sorry, carry on.
So anyway, Hammond also requests the presence of a paleontologist by the name of Dr. Alan Grant to also sign off on the park. They both turn up to the park to have their wondrous... Well, both, I say... It's not both. There's a whole bunch of them. There's
all of them.
All of them. There's the lawyer guy, Gennaro. There's Dr. Ian Malcolm, who's the chaotician. There's Dr. Alan Grant, who is the paleontologist, and Dr. Alan Grant's platonic, maybe, friend, Dr. Ellie Sattler. We'll go into that later. But
we'll discover.
Who is a paleobotanist, and she's also there because, hell, why not? And so, they're having a grand tour of the park. Unfortunately, a storm hits the island during the midst of a rather sneaky operation by one of the employees, who goes by the name of Dennis Nedry, who switches off the security systems in order to smuggle out a number of embryos to sell to a competitor. And then all hell breaks loose, and we will go into what happens. Which
oh boy, does it!
Literally.
Oh, geez.
Oh, hold on to your butts.
All right. Do you want to? How do you want to go through scene by scene?
Let's start from the beginning. So the movie starts off on the island of Isla Nebula. I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's probably incorrect.
I think it's Isla Nublar.
Is it Nublar? It's Nublar, isn't it? Yeah, it is Nublar.
Isla Nublar. Yeah, something like that.
I love the way you rolled the R at the end. That was fantastic.
Well, thank you. That's 3 years of high school Spanish. Thank you very much.
Well, it's come to good use. So yeah, the opening scene. So the opening scene is when they bring the first dinosaur. Well, it's not the first dinosaur, but they're bringing a dinosaur to the park to load them into the cages.
A Velociraptor, I believe.
Yes, and it's where we see the first major character, Robert Muldoon.
Oh, what a guy!
What a guy! Who I think was what was his role? Was he a gamekeeper?
Yeah, he comes across as like the head gamekeeper or something, but he's wearing that like old school sort of Africa explorers outfit from like the old colonial days.
Well, so in the movie, it mentions that John Hammond owns a reserve in Africa. I think it might have said Kenya, and so I think he's brought Robert Muldoon over from there.
Yes, I think so. Yeah,
Robert Muldoon, who's played fantastically by Bob Peck.
Bob Peck,
who
R.I.P.
has the grit and the stoic look on his face that totally brings the character alive.
He's brilliant. And any like English people out there, you'll recognize the sort of stiff upper lip, like all that, like just stoic, no emotion, just like.
Well, no, he does show emotion. He shows emotion when he goes, "Shoot her!"
Yeah, he shows emotion. Like the emotion I get from him is like, this is probably not a good idea.
Right from the beginning. But credit to him, he sticks it out through the entire thing. Like he bitches about the whole thing from the beginning, but he's like, you know what? It's the situation. I'm just going to deal with it.
Well, you get that impression from his character as well that he's a man of principle, and like once he signs a contract, he honors it and stuff like that.
He does indeed. So in the opening scene, what happens is it's the dead of night. Why they're transporting dinosaurs at night, I'm not sure, because just between you and I and everyone else listening, I suppose now. But if I was creating a park full of dinosaurs, I'd try and get them in during the daytime where the visibility might be a bit better.
Yeah. Just probably a good idea.
But anyway, they're loading this cage with the Velociraptor into the raptor pen, and they have this weird electronic locking system on the door, which shows a green light, which indicates the cage has secured itself in the doorway, and now the raptor is allowed to go free. So there's a guy at the top of the cage whose job it is to lift the door. And unfortunately, as he lifts the door and the raptor rushes out, turns out the cage isn't secure, and it rushes back for the raptor to pull in the guy who was on top of the cage.
Oh, right. Well, that's not good.
As he's getting mauled by the raptor, the rest of the staff come in with their stun guns and their other weapons to try and, stop the raptor.
Yeah.
Incapacitate. That's what I was looking for.
Incapacitate. There you go. Subdue.
Subdue is another good word. Yeah. Stop is probably the worst word I could pick. Just stop it, raptor.
So what happens after that is, he falls off, doesn't he? He falls off.
He does. So they have like this amazing, like high-tech locking system that doesn't work, but they have a manual door,
like everything else in Jurassic Park.
I think that there's foreshadowing right there, right? Like that's the point.
Definitely.
I think the principle of Jurassic Park is that electronics fail all the time, and we should just, live like the Amish, basically.
Well, the entire plot of Jurassic Park is just several instances of John Hammond saying, "We spared no expense."
So the next scene is where we first see the lawyer, Donald Gennaro, played by something Ferrero. Martin Ferrero, I think his name is. Who I remember as the guy who played Izzy from Miami Vice.
Oh, I don't think I've seen him in anything. Except Jurassic Park. I've never seen Miami Vice. Sorry.
Well, that's something you're going to catch up on for our next episode.
Oh, I know. I'm prepared. Yeah, definitely.
So we see Gennaro in an ill-fitting suit on a wooden raft, making his way towards an amber mine, where some of Hammond's workers, I suppose, or miners, are hacking away to find amber that contains insects, where they basically extract the DNA to make dinosaurs from.
One of the centerpieces of the movie.
And the purpose of this whole scene is to introduce a couple of things. One is to introduce the lawsuit, which basically is saying that this the worker who died in the previous scene, his family is now suing the park owners.
As you would.
And so, yeah, exactly. And that's why he's been brought in. And he's brought in chaotician Dr. Ian Malcolm. And he's gone to this miner guy saying, where can I find Dr. Alan Grant? Because, he's also needed for this park evaluation.
Yeah.
And the guy who's chopping away at the rock goes, "Grant's like me, he's a digger."
Beautiful quote. That's a beautiful impression.
He doesn't sound anything like that. I'm not even quite sure how it sounds. I'm not quite sure what he means by a digger. It could be a gold digger.
Yeah.
But, we'll assume that he likes digging for bones. So
I think this is setting up the sort of motivation for the whole plot, isn't it?
It is. But here's another interesting thing, right? So it's kind of a throwaway. Well, yeah, it's kind of like passed over in the scene somewhere. But there's mention that the reason why Hammond didn't come with a lawyer to the Amber Mines is because he's actually with his daughter who's going through a divorce. And that in the book is setting up the scene for the kids to turn up, because obviously with the parents splitting up, they thought that, rather subduing the kids to the emotional trauma of parents splitting up, they'll send them to a park full of dinosaurs that's not been tested.
And in the sequels as well. I think I was going to say though, sorry, that it's also a bit of an insight into Hammond's character, as we'll get into later, because it implies that he cares more about, other stuff than like making sure that the business is going smoothly.
Indeed, it does. But you're also right that actually they reused that whole divorce kind of splitting up thing in one of the Jurassic World movies as well. Yeah. But they cut that out from this movie to reduce time, I think that's so the next scene we're at the Badlands, where there's people cleaning up some of the nicest fossils I've seen.
I don't think that's what they really look like.
They're like perfectly, like, they're just brushing a bit of dust off. Like,
it must have been aliens. We'll just blame aliens.
There's more dust in my apartment right now than there were on those bones out in the Badlands. Like, they're really not like that covered.
So what are they doing with these bones?
What we're introduced to Dr. Alan Grant, the lead paleontologist, and he's there with Dr. Ellie Sattler, both played by Sam Neill and Laura Dern, respectively.
Love Laura Dern.
She's fantastic. I think she was only 25 or 26 when the movie came out.
Really?
Yeah, she was very young. I always thought her as to being older than that, because she's one of the more mature characters in the whole movie.
Yeah, she's been around a long time as well. I thought she was older than that.
Yeah, but I think she started off quite young, because I remember her being in Wild at Heart, I think, before that.
Oh, God. Oh. All right, so they get the bones, and I think they're brushing them, right? And then, they go to look at them on the monitor, right? They've got this new technology.
They've got this newfangled technology, and Dr. Alan Grant is this old grizzly guy who, is not very competent when it comes to technology, and apparently machines hate him, and everything electronic goes haywire around him. So they're there with a bunch of people who look like they've come out of a grunge music video with all their plaid shirts and ripped jeans and stuff like that. And they're looking at this new technology where I think they're firing something into the ground. It's like sonar stuff, and it's finding
I don't know how that stuff works. I'm not smart. It's all good.
But then there's this like freakish little kid who's like not impressed by all this stuff and starts to mock the whole dinosaur thing. I think he starts mocking the whole bird thing, right? Because
he says it kind of looks like a 6-foot turkey or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Another great impression. It's almost as good as my my other impression that I just did.
And we know that at this point you see Alan Grant and it's got like that alarms going off. You can tell he's triggered, and I think Ellie goes, "Oh, for God's sake!" Yeah. She knows what's about to happen.
It's got to be quite tiring working with a guy like him.
Absolutely.
Both Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler are like the main protagonists of the movie, right? Like the hero, the hero and the heroine, essentially. But like watching it back now as an adult, Alan Grant's a bit weird.
He is very strange. He is like a dinosaur because he doesn't understand the modern world.
Yeah, but also like his behavior and the way he acts, it's a bit odd. And I'll come back to this in various scenes. But I'm not as taken with him as I was when I initially watched the movie.
Yeah, I think it's Malcolm that becomes my favorite more and more.
Yeah,
every time.
Malcolm was my favorite in the beginning, but he's just elevated. But I have to say that Ellie Sattler was a character who I didn't care much for when I was a kid, but as an adult, I kind of felt that she's kept everything together. Like she's the crux of the whole group, really.
Definitely. The older I get, and I like to think the wiser I get, the more I really, really love that character. Now it's one of my favorite characters. Whereas in the beginning, I didn't really care much for it. So.
I'm in total agreement with you on that.
So he launches into his tirade against this small child.
Yeah, which, you know, in today's culture, that would be recorded on TikTok and shown to everyone.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Alan Grant would be cancelled for traumatizing and abusing a child with his horrible, gross stories about dinosaurs.
Coming at him with like a dangerous weapon with the raptor claw.
Exactly.
And then I think after he's done bullying a child, I think like a dust storm kicks up or something.
Well, so just before we get away from the bullying of the child, I want to mention that this scene also has some foreshadowing that comes on later.
Ah, you're right. Yes.
Yeah. So we'll talk more into that when that scene arrives.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. So basically what happens is that there's a whole bunch of dust kicking around and a helicopter decides to land right next to the dig.
Not good.
Not good at all. And obviously Alan Grant runs over to the helicopter, shouts at the guy, and the guy points to his trailer. So Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler go back to the trailer, and that's when we meet Dr. John Hammond. Is he a doctor, actually?
Oh, God. He's not a doctor. He's just John Hammond. He's just some Hammond. Rich guy, and that's so typical rich guy. Just do what you want. Open the champagne. Just everybody else exists, but you just.
So there's a couple of things, right? One is, how did he get there? So I'd like to think that he probably came on the helicopter, right? But he wasn't there when it landed, causing the dust storm. So they must have dropped him off. And obviously this must have been done in a way that didn't attract any attention. So I'm guessing they probably dropped him off further away. He hobbled there with his cane into the trailer just for the guy to fly around, land on their dig, and ruin their work.
So you don't think the helicopter flew above the cabin and he rappelled down?
No. The cabin. Mission Impossible style. Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
So he's there. Why is he there?
So Dr. Hammond is there with a proposal or a proposition.
Oh,
yeah, no. But before we get into that, I just want to mention one thing. So John Hammond, they were actually considering Sean Connery to play that role.
I could see that, but Sean Connery doesn't have the sort of nice old, pleasant old man vibe that they were going for in this. I think they wanted him to be like a friendly grandpa kind of character.
And that was one of the things which I think is really different from the book, because I think in the book, John Hammond is very one-dimensional. He's like the rich megalomaniac who never changes. He's always about money and about greed and about, obsessing over success. And that's all he is as a character, which I think would be great with Sean Connery.
Yeah, that would work. If they'd have been loyal to the book more and they'd wanted to go down that route, then... Sorry, I said route. If they want to go down that route, then Sean Connery would have been good. But I think...
no expense.
Yeah. I spared no expense.
Oh, that was fantastic.
Thank you. I think for the movie, though, they wanted a more cuddly old grandpa kind of vibe. And
so did Miracle on 34th Street come before or after this?
Actually, it was after this, because if I remember correctly, Attenborough hadn't done a movie since 1979.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this was his first movie since the 70s. Which is weird, because we think of him as just always being around.
It's always being old. The thing is, I don't think... He just grew up old, that's how he came out. But that's the thing, I don't recall him. It was weird, I don't recall him in anything. It was just like Jurassic Park, Miracle on 34th Street, and then that was it. That was my experience of him.
Yeah, the thing is as well, I've heard people criticize the way that they changed his character to make him seem more sort of, less ruthless and stuff. And I think that it does create a sort of conflict, because throughout the whole thing, he says, spared no expense and blah, blah, blah. And I just want to do this for the kids and all that stuff. But then you get with the things that end up going wrong, it's because he didn't spend as much money on it as he should have done. And he cut corners and stuff like that. And so you get the impression that he's sort of not really truthful, and it's just like a front.
Yeah, and I think again it works well in the book, and the interesting thing about the book is that the lawyer is the person who kind of goes through that change. He's the person who
Yeah,
goes in looking at it as
yeah,
a money making thing, and then
yeah,
gets an air of humanity about him by the end. But they
yeah.
kind of put some of that into Hammond. But I think the problem with the movie is they've tried to add that into Hammond, but it's a bit clunky at times, and I don't think it fully works from that perspective. It kind of goes back and forth between the two.
No, yeah, I get that. Yeah.
But that's just my opinion. But yeah, so he's there because he's basically propositioning Dr. Alan Grant to come and review his park full of dinosaurs.
Sounds simple enough.
I have to say that one thing about John Hammond is he has a very interesting accent that kind of goes in and out of Scottish and English. Like, and we've had this discussion in the past. I know you've said that, yes, we get it. He's this guy who grew up in Scotland and he moved to England. Like, that's his character. But, I'd get if, like, maybe his accent picked a bit of each. So he goes between Scottish and English, but it's literally sentence to sentence. He'll say a sentence in Scottish and then the next sentence will be in, like, posh English. And then it'll go back.
It's really weird because I didn't realize it at the time, but it does. The first scene where he speaks, he's really Scottish. And then as the film goes on, he just becomes less and less Scottish. And by the end of it, he's just like this posh old Englishman.
So yeah, he does a bit of bargaining because, obviously Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler are a bit apprehensive about this whole situation, but he agrees to fund their dig for a further 3 years. And that's enough to convince them to come along. He initially proposed Dr. Alan Grant, but then he thinks having a paleobotanist might be useful as well.
And the thing that I love about this is that right at the end of the scene where they agree to it, and then they're like, yay, and then they hug. And right at the end, before it cuts out, you'll hear Ellie just go, wow, like really loud.
I'll have to watch it back for that. I totally didn't catch
She goes, wow, and then it cuts to like them in the helicopter. It's great.
So the next scene in the helicopter is where we see John Hammond with Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler, and they're joined by the lawyer, Donald Gennaro, and the chaotician, Ian Malcolm. It's the first time we see Ian Malcolm.
Yeah.
Who is looking all super cool, dressed in all black with his leather jacket. Played wonderfully by what's his face, Jeff Goldblum.
Oh, good old Goldblum, and the inventor of the nerd hunk,
the nerd hunk, the hot nerd.
Yep.
No, that's I've got to say, like, I was quite inspired by Dr. Ian Malcolm. Like, as a child, I was like, that guy is super cool. Watching it on repeated viewings, like I said, it's kind of like a nerdy cool, a bit weird and creepy now. Like, I think,
yeah, definitely.
I'm not as taken by him as I was when I was a child, but it's still cool. And I think part of it is that knowing Jeff Goldblum, in terms of like seeing him in interviews and stuff like that, you see a lot of him in the character. So before I was like, oh, he's playing Ian Malcolm in this like strange kind of weird chaotician kind of way. It's like, oh no, that's actually how he is. Yeah. So another interesting casting choice, Jim Carrey auditioned for the role of Dr. Ian Malcolm.
I could see that. It would have been way different though. It wouldn't have been this iconic. I don't think it would have been more goofy, because that was his style in the 90s. Was that very sort of goofy, like Ace Ventura kind of thing.
I was going to say, because he can do serious really well, things like The Truman Show and Eternal Sunshine as well. But you're right. I think back in like the early 90s, he wasn't really doing that kind of serious character piece. Although this isn't super serious, but yeah, I kind of feel he would have gone a bit too over the top.
Yeah, he's not quite as like suave and charming as Goldblum as well, so he wouldn't have had the same effect.
That's true. I agree with you on that one. So Ian Malcolm meets Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler for the first time, and we're treated to one of the best laughs ever captured in a movie. So let's I believe it goes something like
That was glorious. Oh my god.
No, it's just genius. It really is. And I'm not quite sure what his motivation was for that. Like, he says the line and they kind of, so I think the line was something, I need to put some chewing gum in my mouth to get the full effect, but I think it was something like, so you two dig up dinosaurs or something like that.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Alan Grant like gives him a bit of side eye and then mutters something under his breath. And then that's when that laugh comes through, which is, yeah.
Which is weird.
It's amazing.
It's such a weird laugh, but it's so good.
So it makes me wonder what they talk about on that helicopter, because, you know, there's a lot of surprises that kind of come about when they land on the island. And there's a lot of questions that get directed towards John Hammond at that point. But I'm thinking to myself, surely some of these discussions should have happened in the helicopter. You know, did you just sit in silence for most of that ride?
I mean, they might have done. They probably don't even know each other. They're all strangers.
So, yeah, so they're in the helicopter flying over towards the island. And there's a bit of foreshadowing that happens, too, on the helicopter.
What's that?
The buckles for the safety.
Oh, yeah.
The safety belt.
Because they get some turbulence and then everybody fastens their seatbelts, but Grant has 2 female connectors, so he can't fasten his seatbelt, and then he ties them together.
He does.
So what's the foreshadowing there?
We will find out.
Oh.
But I've just realized we've totally missed a scene, but we'll have to go. Yeah, we'll have to go back to the other scene afterwards. Oh, yeah. But yeah, you're right. There is some foreshadowing. But what kind of annoys me is that he's got the 2 female ends of the seatbelt, but that means that poor Ellie is left with 2 male ends of the seatbelt. So Dr. Grant is there looking smug on his face because he's just, you know, found a way to buckle himself in, while he's left his esteemed co-worker and friend to just, you know, languish.
Didn't she? Because I thought she buckled her seatbelt. So, because you see, the way I interpreted it was that it was a design flaw with the helicopter, and they'd accidentally put 2 females in there.
So the thing that I don't understand is, given that the lack of space in that helicopter, that it couldn't have been like a spare set of seatbelts between them because they were too close. So then yours might be right, but then you think yourself, okay, shouldn't helicopters go through safety inspections? Which means that that's the kind of stuff they should pick up on.
Oh no, baby, this is Jurassic Park.
Right, this is a Jurassic Park helicopter. We don't do safety inspections.
No, but we spared no expense.
We just spared.
So what's next? What are they?
So the scene that we missed is a classic scene where we are introduced to Dennis Nedry.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love this scene.
So Dennis Nedry is played by the fantastic Wayne Knight, who I remember from Third Rock from the Sun.
Yes,
playing the cop.
Excellent show. Yeah,
and he was also in Basic Instinct.
Oh, was he?
Interesting story. So, well, not really interesting, but from what Wikipedia tells me, because, you know, I try to act smart by reading stuff I find on Wikipedia.
Oh, yeah, do. It's fine.
Steven Spielberg was watching Basic Instinct, and he was taken by Wayne Knight. And he thought, this guy's fantastic. I want to hire him for my movie. So he waited until the credits and wrote down his name. And he was actually the first person to be cast for Jurassic Park. And he was cast without an audition because Spielberg loved him that much. Okay, so we're at the scene where we meet Dennis Nedry for the first time, and he's approached by a guy called Dodgson, who... So when Dodgson first arrives on the scene, he climbs out of a taxi, and he leaves the door open, and you can see the taxi driver get out the car, run around, shake his head at Dodgson while he closes the door. And I just love that. I love those background details in this movie.
That is clever. I never noticed that. I'm going to have to watch it again now.
It's fantastic. Like, it's these little things that really make it, which, you know, I think is what just makes it so enjoyable on repeated viewing.
Well, it's peak Spielberg, isn't it? It's probably like when he was at his... Because he did Schindler's List and this in the same year, didn't he, I think? So Dodgson, sorry, when I was a kid, I always called him Dogson. Now I'm just finding out it's Dodgson. So Dodgson sits down at the table, and I think Nedry, he's like, you should, because Nedry calls out Dodgson, and he's like, you shouldn't use my real name.
Yeah, so Dodgson is from a competing company. And they're out there to steal the secrets of Jurassic Park. So they've approached Dennis Nedry, who is sick and tired of Hammond's spare no expense BS, and has decided to sell out the company secrets for 10 million, was it?
10 million? That's a
1
pretty
million?
good deal.
Was it 1 million?
It might be 1 million. Actually.
It might be 1 million. Maybe I've adjusted for inflation. I don't know.
Hmm.
But yeah, so he's selling the company secrets. So Dodgson has arrived with a bag of money, and he's asking Dennis Nedry to steal some embryos from the cryogenic freezers at Jurassic Park. And Dennis Nedry goes, but how? How am I going to take these embryos out of the island? And Dodgson shows them this fantastic Barbasol cat.
Iconic.
Which
Iconic.
I didn't even know Barbasol was an actual brand until way later.
Neither did I.
Because we never had this in the UK.
No, we didn't.
But I want to try it because of this movie. Product placement at its finest.
And I believe as well you can actually get replicas of this Barbasol can where it like pops out at the bottom and you spin it and like they click up and
which is fantastic. So just the prop is great. So it's basically this shaving can that screws off at the top and all like the embryo chambers pop out of the bottom.
And it still functions.
It still functions. And there's a great moment.
No, I was going to say, and you can also use it to ruin people's pie, like Nedry does.
The other great thing Nedry does is he lets off this high-pitched squeal, which originally... I originally thought that was a sound coming from the can. Like I thought it was part of the mechanism until way later where it's like, oh no, it's the grown dude who's just squealing away.
He's just an adult child.
He is. He also has the most hairless arms I've ever seen on a man. Like
he's very smooth. Yes. No, zero arm hair. Maybe he's maybe he uses Barbasol.
Exactly. So it's a perfect product placement, right?
There you go.
Nedry agrees to steal the embryos and he sets up the date and time. So they're going to meet him at the East Docks at a particular time, and he has an 18-minute window to basically escape off the island. Then, before the scene closes, again, another bit of brilliant Spielberg stuff. The waitress comes over with the bill, and Nedry looks at Dodgson and looks back at the bill
and says,
"Don't cheap out on me, Dodgson. That was Hammond's mistake."
Oh, that's for sure. We spared no expense. Oh, you did, boy.
But I love how they chucked that in there. They didn't just say it. It wasn't just a case of, we're gonna make Nedry, explain like how unhappy he is with Hammond. It's just the fact that they tied it in with the receipt for the end of the meal. I thought it was just a really, really nice touch.
It's great as well because it tells you everything you need to know about his character. It tells you that he is rude, also very smart, I assume, because he's, committing espionage. He seems selfish, kind of gross, because, he's like, he's sort of, I think he's licking his fingers or like wiping his hands or something. There's food everywhere. And then there's a bit with the shaving cream on the pie. And then it also tells you that he is having money problems because Hammond doesn't pay him enough. And that's the motivation for the movie. And that's all you need to know about Nedry's character because you won't find out anything else about it.
But you don't need to. And I think
you don't need to at all.
And I think sometimes this whole thing, and especially I think it's become a recent thing of trying to build up too much backstory for a character, is sometimes not needed.
Absolutely. And that's what's cool about this movie as well is the way that they normally with movies you go, this is my character, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, and then the movie starts. But with this, you don't. You just go straight into it and you learn little bits as you go along. You find out more and more about each character.
It's true. I'm still waiting for the Jurassic Park prequel where we go through Dennis Nedry's life and find out how he becomes the engineer at Jurassic Park and how his family life shaped his money problems. There's an Oscar-winning drama in there somewhere, I'm sure.
I don't know if that's a movie I want to see.
It's a movie I want to make.
Let's do it. Anybody who's listening, if you want to invest, movies don't cost much to make these days, do they?
No, the biggest expense is buying up the rights to Jurassic Park, I think.
Oh, yeah. Where do we go from here? What's the next?
So the next scene is the helicopter scene that we kind of jumped to a bit too early.
Yes.
But let's assume that, now the helicopter scene happens. We've got the hurrah, ha, 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 ha laugh. We've got the foreshadowing with the seatbelts. And now we see a lovely waterfall with the helicopter coming down. As again, the scenery in this movie is fantastic, I have to say.
Hawaii.
Yeah. And so, we have the helicopter landing and we're now entering Jurassic Park.
All right.
So we have two cool-looking Jeeps dressed up in Jurassic Park livery.
I don't know. Paint.
Jurassic paint. And so so now we're in the Jurassic Park Jeeps heading towards the park itself. And again, we get a bit more story now as well. So we get a discussion between Gennaro and Hammond, where Gennaro is kind of explaining to Hammond the situation with the lawyers, and that, he's here not to have a good time, but to see how safe the park is. Otherwise, he's going to shut this thing down. And sadly, I think there was a deleted scene, but there's a bit in the movie which is kind of taken out where you see Dr. Sattler pull a plant or a fern.
Yes, and that's from the book, and they filmed it in the extended version, but then it was taken out to save time, I assume, because there's nothing wrong with that shot, but they must have just taken it out to save time. But I remember seeing an extended version where you do see her pull a leaf off of a plant.
Which I think it's a nice touch, because it's introducing the fact that they haven't just gone and cloned dinosaurs, they've cloned plants as well.
Yes.
Which amazes me, because I don't know, they talk about the whole frog DNA with the dinosaurs.
Yeah, but they never explain how they've cloned the plants.
No. How did they extract the information for the plants as well? Like, you can't just go into Amber and go, I'm going to take this plant extract from this mosquito.
Yeah, so the conversation that Gennaro has with Hammond, Gennaro's tone is very serious, because everybody's happy to be there and they're having a good time. And Gennaro brings it down a bit and says, like, look, this is serious. If we pass inspection, I'll shut you down. And then you get Hammond's very arrogant, in 24 hours or whatever, I'll be accepting your apology. And he's very arrogant and smarmy about it.
That's
that's going to bite him in the ass.
But you're right. Yeah, no, that is definitely showing the kind of competition between them, and like you said, like the confidence Hammond has in his park.
Yeah.
So we see them driving around empty fields, and amazingly, no one looks around to see if there's any dinosaurs, because Sattler, being a paleobotanist, is obviously fascinated by a leaf, so I get that. Dr. Ian Malcolm is fascinated by Dr. Sattler, so I think he's just looking at the back of her head. Gennaro is looking through legal paperwork, and Dr. Alan Grant, who is a paleontologist, is staring straight ahead at the seat in front of him for some bizarre reason.
He's dead inside. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't want to be there.
As the Jeep is trundling around an open field, it finally stops at a random place where we pan towards our first proper view of a dinosaur, I'd say, in the whole movie.
Yes, and this is such an amazing moment in cinematic history. I think as well it was designed not only to be part of the plot, but also to because this is the first time we're seeing this technology being used. So you get this big moment where you and the characters share this sense of like, holy shit, it looks like a real ass dinosaur. Do you know what I mean?
But how do you do that with the characters in an open top Jeep in an open field? And I think they must have had to react to nothing at the time. So there's this whole thing of where everyone has to take off their sunglasses, because that's how you show drama when you're looking at something, right? It's like, my sunglasses have to come off, my hat has to come off, I have to view this better. Ray-Ban must have made a killing from this movie in terms of, purchases, because literally everyone's got glasses on. I mean, there's a bevy of frames. I'd love to sit down with someone who, has some knowledge about glasses and kind of review the various frames that are in the movie. It's fantastic.
That would be a really exciting podcast.
On today's podcast, we talk about the frames of Jurassic Park.
Oh god! All right, so because you see that he's standing up, because he's that look of shock on his face, and Ellie's still obsessed with the leaf.
Yeah,
everybody else is just dumbstruck, staring.
And Alan Grant reaches down, grabs Ellie Sattler by the head, and shifts it towards the dinosaurs.
He's like, look at this. Oh my god. And then she's like, holy shit. And you can see her and they're both just slack-jawed, climb up on the Jeep. And then you get that beautiful swell of music and you see the Brachiosaurus.
And we have to mention that John Williams' score in this is something else.
Oh, incredible. Absolutely incredible.
It's so catchy, so iconic. And I have to say that this entire scene has been ruined by that famous or infamous melodica cover that's on YouTube.
Yeah. And now every time I hear Jurassic Park theme, now I expect that melodica to come in, and I just can't. It's ruined it. Thanks, whoever that was who did that like 15 years ago.
It still holds up today. I mean, that's almost retro in itself. So we see the CGI Brachiosaurus, I think it is.
It is, yes.
In this wonderful scene where it's kind of reaching up on its hind legs to get to the topmost leaves.
Yeah.
And then we pan out to like a scenic view of like a lake and brachiosaurs coming out of it, and
Parasaurolophus.
Parasaurolophus,
yes. Yeah. There might even be some Edmontosauruses there. I can't remember.
Okay. And they're moving in herds.
They do move in herds, Nabil. But you get that bit where like Alan Grant's like, he's like, he can't breathe, he's about to pass out, and he's like, it's a dinosaur, and everybody's like freaking out.
Apart from Ian Malcolm, who's just super cool.
Oh yeah, and Malcolm's like, I did it, crazy son of a bitch, did it. And then you get Hammond's incredible iconic line, welcome to Jurassic Park. Like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think for me, like that's where, the movie starts now. Like everything is just
absolutely
some preamble, and now it's like, boom, we're in Jurassic Park now. This is it.
Hell yeah.
So then they arrive at the main visitor complex.
Yes.
Where they're about to embark on a little video tour, which shows them how the whole process of extracting DNA happens and how they clone the dinosaurs. And we have a Mr. DNA show up, who is this character
Mr. DNA,
who sound with a Southern gent accent, who talks about dino DNA.
It's in your blood. That's great.
With some really 90s looking animation.
Oh yeah, amazing. So I love Mr. DNA, and I think it's a really clever little way to sort of explain the plot and stuff like that, the premise of it all, without it being too weird and jarring. They've sort of nicely kind of fitted, that's not a word. They've nicely kind of fit it in with, it's a plot device, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. It's a classic thing of how do you explain something in a movie to the audience without it being too on the nose, and exactly what you said. Yeah. Like, I think that's the great thing about the movie. Just like with the dinosaur reveal, it's like we're the guests to Jurassic Park. We're we're living through the characters. This is our first time experiencing the dinosaurs. Then we go, how did they do that? So we're following the same journey there. So they're following as well.
And you see them like as like when he explains that they got it from the amber, and then they did this and blah blah blah. And sorry if I was going to jump in ahead of you here, but there's that bit where they say, well, what we do is any gaps in the DNA, we fill them in with frog DNA. And he's like, and boom, there you go, you've got a baby dinosaur. And you see like the amazement on the characters' faces when it clicks, and they're like, that's how you did it. That's insane.
Which I have to say is one cool thing about the way Crichton has written the story. So we know the science doesn't really work, but it's believable enough. That's the thing. As a casual viewer, it's great pseudoscience, right? Like it sounds acceptable.
Oh yeah, it sounds feasible. I mean,
and I think that's a great way in terms of how it's been written. I think there's various things as well in the movie where you feel that the way Crichton's written it, he has thought about some of these things quite carefully and hasn't just shoved them in for the sake of plot.
Yeah.
Or he hasn't jumped from one thing to the next, things like, oh yeah, so the frog DNA, because frogs can change sex, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Although why frog DNA, I've never understood. Like if the kind of dinosaurs descended from like reptiles or birds, wouldn't like pigeon DNA make more sense?
yeah, probably. But it's what's interesting about the science behind it, though, is that I think I read a story somewhere where he got in touch with this professor at a college somewhere in America who had these theories about, cloning dinosaurs and stuff. And he'd gone to see him, but he'd disguised his name as something else, not Michael Crichton. And he'd gone to see this professor and learned all about, the theories and stuff like that. And then later on, the book came out and the professor's read this book and it's all of his theories about cloning dinosaurs. And he's like, oh.
soon. I want some of that Jurassic Park cash.
Hell yeah.
Then we get to the next part of the tour where the show ends and the seats lock the protagonists in and start spinning around to view the laboratories where the scientists are hard at work.
Yeah.
And we see various machines and scientists walking around. And Gennaro delivers the great line, "Are those autoerotica?"
Autoerotica. This is a PG movie. Come on.
And Hammond goes, "Oh, you mean animatronics?" And I love that because, again, that's something I never picked up as a kid.
No, neither did I. I didn't know what autoerotica was when I was like 10 years old.
No. But I love how they shove that in.
So this is the bit where I think Grant and Sattler have a lot of questions that aren't being answered, right?
Yeah, Grant wants to know how they perform the cellular mitosis, I believe, and Dr. Sattler is asking another question that I've totally forgotten. And so
it's all right.
I don't think it's that important. I don't think anyone cares.
It's fine.
And then
their questions aren't important.
And then to show again that Hammond spared no expense, they managed to lift the barriers clean away to escape. Oh, Hammond, you cheap ass mother!
Why is he doing this? Anyway, so once again, this shows Dr. Grant's sort of the way that all technology around him malfunctions. Which, oh my god, I've just figured it out. I've figured it out, Nabil. So Alan Grant is a person who all technology breaks around him wherever he is. Jurassic Park is an island full of fancy technology. That means Alan Grant broke Jurassic Park. It's his fault.
See, if he hadn't invited Alan Grant, that would have the butterfly effect, right? That's the thing. Like
exactly.
It's what chaos.
So he breaks the ride. He like pushes the metal barrier up.
Well, the three of them do. So I think Sattler, Malcolm, and Grant all work together to overthrow the shackles.
The shackles
oppression
of the Disneyland ride oppression.
And they escape to head into the laboratories, which we are introduced to Dr. Henry Wu, who Dr. Wu, who is one of the guys who has led a lot of the advancements in dinosaur cloning, I guess.
And who plays Henry Wu again? I forgot the actor's name. Sorry.
Yes, I have forgotten. I'm just going to look it up now as well.
Because he is quite well known, but I always
it's on the tip of my tongue, and it's sorry. Wikipedia's come up with a Steely Dan song. I don't think that's him.
To be fair, that might be one of the few things that could make that movie even better, is if it had the entire membership of Steely Dan in it.
So it's BD Wong.
BD Wong. There we go.
Do you know what BD stands for?
I do not.
Bradley Darrell.
Bradley Darrell Wong. Well, if you listen, Bradley Darrell Wong. I'm so sorry. Okay, carry on.
They've just arrived in time to see a little egg hatching.
Okay.
And that's all I've got.
The end. Roll credits. It's a Velociraptor egg, right?
Yeah.
I believe.
And yes, that's true. And that's where Alan Grant goes, gets shocked that they're breeding velociraptors because velociraptors are a kind of a big deal in this movie, I think.
Yeah, which is weird because before the movie came out, I don't think I even knew what a velociraptor was, and I was a dinosaur nerd.
So for me, I remember one of my favorite dinosaurs as a kid was Deinonychus, which is from the raptor family, and actually was more closer in size to the raptors in the movie than Velociraptor. So I think Velociraptor was the smaller size. It was about half the size of Deinonychus.
Yes, yeah. And they did that. They did that with a few of the dinosaurs, didn't they? They changed them around to make them more effective.
Yeah. And I guess the reason is that saying Deinonychus is not as catchy as saying raptors.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of hard to pronounce as well because I've heard people pronounce it Deinonychus.
Yeah.
So I still don't know what's. I don't know.
I neither do I, which is why I kind of looked it up, and I think it's pronounced Deinonychus because I used to think it was Deinonychus as well before.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it then.
But yeah, I remember what the scene is for. The scene is to set up the whole thing of that all the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park are female, and that's how they control breeding.
Yes, and it also as well. This is it's reliant on the book, but anyway, there's Hammond does that thing where he's like, come on, and he encourages it out of the egg, and while he's holding it, he says, "I've been present for the birth of every animal on this island," because it helps them to they bond with the first thing they see,
right?
And so they think of him as their mother, supposedly, which is funny because in the book, Hammond dies at the end.
So he doesn't escape off the island.
His children. So that obviously didn't work either.
No.
Check that off the list. There's another one. There's another thing that didn't work.
Spared no expense. You're right. That's one good thing about the book is that you kind of have that circle thing of Hammond's confidence and his ability to think that everything revolves around him.
Yeah.
That he's there for the birth of these dinosaurs. They all bond with him, and he's safe. But we know that's not to be the case.
He ain't
safe. He ain't nothing.
So all the dinosaurs in the park are female.
Yes.
So theoretically, they can't breed.
No. And Ian Malcolm is shocked by this because he believes life will find a way, and this kind of thing just won't work in his eyes.
Yes, and this is sort of setting up, sort of helping to sort of show his role as the naysayer. He's the critic. He's the voice of reason who's going to be like, wait, hang on a second, guys. This is not a good idea.
The next scene is they leave the hatchery and they head towards the raptor pen. Here we have and I guess the reason to go to the raptor pen is because now everyone's found out that they breed raptors. So like, let's check out the raptor pen.
Yeah.
And, we get to the raptor pen and I'm not surprised the raptors are pissed off because that looks like a very small space for them.
It does. I always thought that because I think this is where we see Muldoon again for the first time after the opening scene. Grant asks him how many raptors have they got, and I think he says they had 6 or 8.
Eight. Yeah, it was 8 originally.
So I'm like, you had 8 raptors in a space the size of like smaller than a Waffle House or something. I was like, what's going on? And this is the bit where he says that the alpha of the pack killed 6 of the other ones.
Yes,
something.
Yeah. Like that. The big one killed 6 of the other ones.
So there's 3 of them left, right? There's
2.
The alpha, and then I thought there was 3.
There's only 2 raptors. Is it 3 or 2?
Because the way I thought there was, because this is used again in the Jurassic World movies. There's 3 of them. They hunt in packs of 3.
There's 3 in Jurassic World, but I think there's only 2 in Jurassic Park.
Well, if you listen to at the beginning when Grant explains how raptors attack, he says there's 1 in front of you, and then 2 of them come from each side, or 1 of them comes from each side. Sorry, so they hunt in packs of 3. So,
if anyone out there can confirm for us, that would be settle an age-old debate of how many raptors are in Jurassic Park.
There might be 2, actually. You might be right, but
although I think you might be right. I think the Jurassic Park wiki is saying that there are 3.
Okay, well, 2 or 3, it's fine.
2 or 3. Yeah, it's one of those 2 numbers anyway.
So we go to see the raptors. We don't actually see the raptors in this scene, though, do we? Because that's going to come later.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't actually see many. Yeah, we'll get into the flaws of the park and people's ability to see dinosaurs later on. But what this scene sets up is we get more of Muldoon's, stoic, very somber views on the whole situation.
I think when Hammond first introduces him, I think the first thing he says is they should all be destroyed.
Yes, he does.
Which shows you what he thinks of the whole situation.
And Muldoon is explaining how the raptors have been systematically testing the fences for weak spots and he says something to the effect of, "They remember."
Yeah, you get a lot of information in the dialogue as well in this movie, which is incredible. Like back when Grant's explaining how raptors attack, he mentions that T-Rexes can't see you if you don't move, and it's like all the lines are filled with bits of information that is setting your expectations for what's about to happen.
It's very true, and I think it's another great thing about the movie is the script is very tight in that aspect. Like, I don't feel there's not a lot of wasted dialogue, and the way things are introduced, it's very natural.
Yeah,
it's foreshadowing, but it doesn't seem forced in. It doesn't. You don't go, well, that's a really weird thing to mention. It feels natural.
No, it's brilliant as well, because the things that you learn about raptors in this scene, where they're at the raptor pen, is you learn that they can run 35 miles an hour, cheetah speed. He says
60. I think it's the T-Rex runs 32, and the raptors 50 is 60. Okay. And he also mentions that they can jump very high, which also comes into play later on in the movie as well.
Yes, it does.
They've already setting all that information up for you.
And then he says, and then at the end, Hammond says, "Well, anybody hungry?"
Yeah, they're serving up Chilean sea bass apparently, which sounds
Chilean
delicious.
Sea bass.
Chilean sea bass.
I don't know. I never knew what sea bass was until I grew up and realized it was like fish or something.
Have you ever had Chilean sea bass? I think we're too far away to actually really experience Chilean sea bass.
I remember seeing the movie though and looking at when they're actually eating the sea bass, and it just looks like fish fingers to me. Fish fingers with like shredded Parmesan cheese on top.
Potato waffles on the side.
Oh, hell yeah.
So actually that's the next scene, right? Because we end up in the lunchroom where there's loads of projections on the wall of various pictures.
It's like a conference room or something,
yes.
Right? I think.
Which, if you pause the DVD, you see some really interesting charts on the walls.
What are the charts?
You see one that has a comparison of attendance between Jurassic Park sports events and zoos, and they predict that Jurassic Park is going to have way more attendees, and then the next year it's going to be even more. We also see that there's plans of opening a Jurassic Park in Europe as well.
Oh, thank God they didn't. That would have ruined my childhood.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't have been as good either.
Are there any other graphs on there? Is it just like a static?
They're just static pictures that flash on and off, and I can't really see because I think there's a lot of things obscured by people and stuff like that.
So what are they doing at this lunch that they're having?
They're having a discussion about what they've just seen, and I think what Hammond's trying to do is trying to go like, well, guys, aren't you impressed by what you've seen? And he's facing a lot of backlash. Ian Malcolm, who's first of all giving his no, actually, it starts off with Gennaro, who's very excited about the whole premise of Jurassic Park. And he's just going, we could sell tickets for 1,000 or whatever, and talks about a coupon day for the poor people. And
well, thanks, guys.
And then, they try to make Hammond like more of a, humane person. He goes, no, I want everyone to experience Jurassic Park. Like it's not just for the rich. Yeah, sure, Hammond. And so he's got the lawyer's point of view. And I think Ian Malcolm chimes up about how, he's not happy with what's going on here. And I think, I don't know if it's this scene or a later one where he goes, that Hammond hasn't earned the right to build this.
That's this scene. Yeah, that's this scene. He gives the speech where he says the problem with the power that you have is that it didn't require any discipline to attain it, or something like that. He basically says you took what other people had achieved and you just, without fully understanding the technology, you just built on top of it and used it for your own selfish ends.
And something to the extent of you were so concerned if you could, you stopped to think if you should, as something of that nature.
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. Which has been my mantra.
Which is as applicable to the world we live in now as it was back in the days of Jurassic Park.
Yes, we're looking at you, Elon Musk, with your brain chips and stuff.
we know Hammond doesn't care much for Ian Malcolm and his theories, so
Yeah.
he's more concerned with what Alan Grant and what Ellie Sattler are thinking. And Alan
Yes.
Grant is being his weird. He's worried about the park as well.
Yeah. I think as well, because he's the last one to give his opinion, isn't he? Hammond is kind of even Grant's like, well, I don't know, who knows what's going to happen, we don't know, so no answer. And then you can see Hammond's blown away because he was expecting everybody to be like, wow, this is amazing, and now everybody has very legitimate concerns, and he's like, the only one who's on my side is the blood-sucking lawyer. You can tell Gennaro's kind of like flattered by that. It's like a compliment.
Oh, thank you. Then we hear that his grandkids have turned up to the island.
Yes.
We're now heading off to the beginning of the tour, where we're introduced to the two kids, Lex and
Timmy.
That's correct. Timmy being the young boy, Lex being the older sister. And yeah, we find out that they are very excited to see their grandpappy, but also Timmy is a huge fan of Dr. Alan Grant.
Yes, he's read his book or something. Right?
Yeah, apparently he reads, really boring adult paleontology books. Whereas, when I was a 10-year-old, I like to read dinosaur books with loads of pictures. And
we were reading, like Transformers comic books and stuff.
We weren't reading scientifically published books written by,
yeah.
Huge volumes.
It's funny because I suppose that would sort of tell us that Timmy is incredibly smart. But then sometimes you don't get the impression that he is like terribly, like super, super smart.
No, because he's just a child, isn't he?
Yeah.
But one thing I do love is like they've kind of aped Alan Grant's outfit in Timmy as well. So he's got like the light blue shirt, which is the same as Alan Grant. He's got beige shorts, and Alan Grant has like beige pants of some form. And the little neck cravat thing, like.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, you can see, like, they've kind of tried to make that bond between the two of them.
Would you say that Lex is sort of being compared to Ellie in a way?
No, I don't think. I can't remember if it's in the book. I think in the book, it's a bit more weird. She has, like, this creepy crush on Alan Grant in the book.
Oh.
Which is and I think
I'm glad they got rid of that.
You see bits of it in the movie though, like she's smiling at him and looking at him like
yeah.
And there's a couple of scenes but I think they definitely toned it down for the movie compared to the book.
Yeah.
But I think she's more of a computer nerd than a dinosaur fan because she doesn't really know much about dinosaurs. Because there's one point where she goes, "Are those Metosauruses?"
Oh, yeah, she doesn't know shit about dinosaurs, but she knows a lot because you see her get into the car eventually after a little song and dance, which, I don't know, you want to talk about that? Because this is showing how Grant does not like children.
No.
And we didn't mention it, but in that scene earlier where they were at the dig site, before the helicopter comes in, he says to her, "Do you really want one of those?" which also implies that they're together in a romantic relationship, which they are not in the book, I don't think, but they are in the movie for some reason.
I don't think they are. I think it's a bit ambiguous in the movie still as well, because I think it's more clear in the book that it's platonic, but I think in the movie they never fully show it. There's another scene later on where Ian Malcolm is asking Dr. Grant if they're together, and Alan Grant says yes, but it's more like, "Oh, I'm protecting her. I'm getting this creep off her back by like, just
yeah, that's true. And he's never affectionate to her throughout the whole movie, which you figured you would be if it was your romantic partner.
Which I think is kind of nice because I think it's such a common trope to have like the lead actress and lead actor kind of get together in a movie, especially like a family action movie like this. I think it's nice that it's just like, well, maybe they're just platonic friends who like love each other and know each other for years. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and the story's not about their relationship anyway, so there's no need to put all that in.
Yeah, and I feel it would have just made it clunky, and the stakes are just as high without that.
Yeah. So they have that song and dance, right, with the cars where he doesn't like kids and Tim's following him through the cars and like all around trying to like figure out where he's going to sit.
And can we talk about the cars for a second? Because
yes, please. Yes.
I have to say, like, watching the movie, I fell in love with the Ford Explorer.
Yeah, I still see them I still see them now, like driving around. I mean, they're not fluorescent green and red, obviously. But
The
sadly,
garish paint scheme of that, like,
the 90s. Yeah.
The gradient from green to yellow, and then like the bright red like patterns over the top of it, and then you got like the safari bull bars, safari roof kind of thing on it. It's just
beautiful.
Such a good looking car. Yeah, I think if I had enough money, I'd buy myself an old 90s Ford Explorer and do it up like that. In fact, I'd have a garage full of like classic TV cars.
Exact.
The Ecto-1, Knight Riders, Pontiac Firebird, a DeLorean.
Yes, a DeLorean
would be fantastic. But an interesting fact.
Yes.
As you know in the movie, the Explorers run on a rail system. So they're automated and they just follow the rail that's in the ground. And one thing I always thought as a child is that they actually built those. That they built these cars that travel on rails. Turns out they didn't. They actually have a guy who's in the back in the trunk or the boot, and he's covered up, and he's actually driving the car from back there.
Is he steering it?
Apparently so. So if you look, there's a little camera. There's a little camera on the front of the. You see it in the scene, like where they're heading to the cars. There's a little camera at the front of the car pointing towards the rail on the ground.
Oh, that's genius! Oh, so clever. I have no idea. That's amazing.
So cool, isn't it? So we see them. You're right. We have a song and dance, and then we have the group split between the cars. So I think we have Gennaro with the kids.
Gennaro and the kids in one car, and then
we have Sattler.
Grant. Isn't?
Yes, Sattler, Grant, and Malcolm in the other one.
Yes. So, but wasn't because at the when they're getting into the cars, he gets into a car. He puts Timmy in one of the other cars to try and get away from him. But then when he gets in the car, Lex is already there. And Lex says, she said, we should ride with you because it would be good for you. And then you see Ellie smile. So I thought Grant got in the car with the children. But now I'm confused.
But don't they have a scene where like Malcolm is discussing things with them about chaos theory?
But... Oh, yeah, no, you're right. Well, anyway, some people are in one car and some more people are in another car.
Again, these are all details you want to hear in a podcast, is listening to two people trying to remember how many people are in each car in Jurassic Park.
They're the only types of podcasts that I listen to.
So the tour begins and the cars trundle off, and we then, let me see where am I on the notes. Then we see... we see Mr. Ray Arnold.
Oh, Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel L. Jackson in one.
He was also unknown at this point, wasn't he?
A real departure from the Samuel L. Jackson roles we've come to know him for.
I love this role. It's just constantly chain smoking, cynical. His character's great because all this thing, everything's falling apart around him, and the whole time, he's just like, for God's sake, I just want to go home.
He sticks it out, like he's like Muldoon. He sticks it out, and he's there to just try and fix the problems. Like that's, he complains, he grumbles, but he tries to fix the problems. And he's up there with Muldoon as some of my favorite characters in the movie.
Is this where we get Hold On to Your Butts?
Yes. In fact, it says
it happens twice.
It happens twice, and this is the first Hold On to Your Butts. Yeah.
Nice. Which is funny because my entire life, I thought he only said that line once, and it was only when I was rewatching it for this that I realized he says it twice.
Yeah, because I remember it in the scene later on, the second scene where he says it. But I didn't remember it happening this early on in the movie.
Well, he does, apparently.
And so the tour begins, and the explorers go through those wonderful, massive Jurassic Park gates that are just beautifully iconic. And I think it's Malcolm who goes, "What have they got in there? King Kong."
No, it's much worse, my friend.
But the interesting thing is that those gates were influenced by the gates in the King Kong movie.
Yeah, you can see that. Yeah, I can see that.
Which I think is, I think that's a great production design right there, because it's just a lovely, homage to those classic monster movies, but at the same time, it's just a really cool, iconic look.
And is this the bit where the computer starts talking to them, and he's like, "This is the voice of Richard Kiley. We spared no expense."
Exactly.
And but I remember watching it, and still to this day, every time I watch it, I'm like, "Who the hell is Richard Kiley?" I don't know who that is.
No,
Am I supposed to be impressed by that? I'm sorry, Richard Kiley, but I'm sure you've achieved many good things. But like, I don't know who that is. Sorry.
I completely glossed that over. But what I didn't gloss over was the fact that they were item 151 on the glitch list for that day.
What was item 150?
The light's not working on the...
Oh, God.
And they were draining the batteries on the Explorers.
And that's just for that one day.
Indeed. Okay. Which,
Spared no expense.
Working in software, I kind of feel for Dennis Nedry.
Yeah.
He's one of those characters who I hated as a child, and I'm not... he's still a terrible character, obviously, because he's responsible for the death of all the people on the island and everything else. And he was greedy and selfish and doing immoral and wrong things. But
yeah,
I kind of understand that feeling of IT being underappreciated.
Yeah. And underpaid as well. You can appreciate, and he's running an entire theme park and a zoo just by himself, pretty much. Him and Arnold just running it by themselves.
I'm sure there are other people there, but I think, I think they have a very small IT team compared to Dr. Henry Wu and all his team of scientists. There seem to be quite a lot of them down in the egg room, but
but that's it's very consistent with everything else that's happening, because you'll see Hammond, when it comes to the science, the dinosaur guys, he's literally spared no expense. But when it comes to everything else, he just assumes that he knows best, and we'll just, we won't pay them much, and we can run an entire theme park with 2 IT guys. Do you know what I mean? It's no, listen to the experts, John, for God's sake.
It's true. And we actually see in the background, we see these awesome supercomputers with flashing red lights.
Yes.
Which were actual real supercomputers at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were the
supercomputers. 90s,
the CM5 connection machine, which was actually iconic for its look with all its fancy flashing red lights.
Well, there's another little detail that I didn't notice, but that's really cool.
Yeah, I think they were the most powerful computers at the time, or something like that.
Oh,
but yeah, that's a really cool little look to the thing.
That is nice.
They're arguing in the control center, so Dennis Nedry's being a slob. Arnold's getting frustrated by the whole bugs. We get an exchange between Nedry and Hammond, where Nedry is talking about how he needs to free up computing cycles to fix the bugs, and Hammond should be impressed by all the things he's been doing given the lack of resources. And he's talking about his financial problems, and I think does Hammond say something like, "Your financial problems are your own."
Oh yeah, he's like, what does he say? I don't remember, but he basically says he has that line where he says, "I don't blame people for their mistakes, but I do ask that they pay for them," which is fucking rich coming from him. If you haven't figured it out by now, I am going to shit all over John Hammond this entire thing.
But there's a classic line where John Hammond is shouting at Dennis Nedry, and he goes, "Dennis, our lives are in your hands, and you have butterfingers." And the way he says butterfingers, his voice cracks. Butterfingers. It's just genius.
But this is also an important scene, because it's the bit where I don't know if it is this. It might be this scene. Yeah, it's because it is. It's the bit where Nedry says, "Do you know anyone else who can do this job for as cheaply as I'm doing it?" So basically implying,
spared no expense.
You spared no expense.
But you're right. That's exactly that. That's the point. Is he's showing off his park and going on about how he spared no expense, but behind the scenes, he's obviously cheaped out on a lot of things.
He has.
So then, they're bickering away, and we get Muldoon with his legs up, going, "Quiet! They're approaching the T-Rex paddock."
Oh yeah. No, he says. They're approaching the Tyrannosaur paddock. It's amazing.
So they approach the Tyrannosaurus Rex paddock, and I actually love the scene as it comes in because it's really atmospheric. You've got like the stormy clouds forming and these like huge forest trees
Wait,
and this
hang on a
massive
second.
thing.
Sorry, I'm going to want to stop you there. What about the Dilophosaurus?
We haven't got there yet.
No, that's the Dilophosaurus is the first one.
Have we missed it? Have I missed the Dilophosaurus on the thing? Yes, I have.
Yeah, Dilophosaurus first, and it doesn't show up,
You're
and then they
right.
do the T-Rex paddock, and that doesn't show up, and then they go on.
You are right. So, okay, we'll go back to the Dilophosaurus then. The Dilophosaurus was one of the dinosaurs where they took a lot of artistic license in terms of.
Yeah, they did.
Because, I remember seeing it in the movie and going, oh, this is a really cool dinosaur. Why have I never heard of this one before? It turns out it didn't have the cool frilly thing, and it definitely didn't spit acid at people.
And it was about twice as big, wasn't it? It was because they swapped the sizes around. Velociraptors were actually very small. Velociraptors were small, and Dilophosaurus was quite large, and they switched the sizes around. I don't know why they did that, but yeah, I remember because I remember after the movie came out, I remember reading about that and being like, "Oh, that's dumb."
Yeah, I wonder why they did switch them around.
I don't know. It's very strange.
I guess to make it smaller so it fits into Nedry's Jeep, as we see later on.
Yeah, and it makes the raptors way scarier as well. Because if a raptor was the size of a dog or something, it wouldn't be that scary. But when you make it the size of, a tiger or a lion or something big like that, it becomes more terrifying.
But I think the purpose of the scene is yet again like it's building up interest for the dinosaurs, but the tourists are not seeing anything because the explorers are moving too fast on the rail, and
there's too many leaves, like
too much vegetation, right?
Way
like
too much.
When you go to a zoo, you see a gorilla in this like concrete space with like one log or something, right? And it's looking miserable. But in Jurassic Park, you've got this lush greenery and all these plants and trees and stuff, and it's like, yeah, what on earth are you going to see?
Yeah, it's wall-to-wall leaves just everywhere, but it's funny because it's the same when they get to the T-Rex paddock as well.
Yeah,
weird, strange.
Just loads of plants, loads of trees. You're not really going to see much of a T-Rex in there.
It's very odd. So they go from the Dilophosaurus pen to that. I think in between that's when we get that scene with Nedry and Hammond.
Indeed. And then we approach the T-Rex paddock, but again, nothing really happens. They put a poor goat out to try and entice the T-Rex. And Dr. Grant goes something about T-Rex not wanting to be fed.
T-Rex. Yeah, he says T-Rex doesn't want to be fed. He wants to hunt.
Yes.
Foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing.
This movie is full of foreshadowing and like red flags and alarm bells.
And then we get another scene with Ian Malcolm flirting with Dr. Sattler.
Yep, he's relentless.
Talking about chaos theory using water in her hand, and she's giggling away while Alan Grant rolls his eyes. Like the rest of
and he's been super creepy here, Ian Malcolm. He's like grabbing her by the hair and like going and like being really creepy.
Does he grab her by the hair? Like grabs her by the hand. But
I can't remember the line, but he makes I think it's when they're joking about they joke about something, and while they're laughing, you can see him just reach up with his right hand and grab her hair and just give it a little tug. He just tugs on it really gently.
God.
I'm like, oh God.
Terrible.
Awful.
Bad Malcolm.
So he's explaining chaos theory, the butterfly effect and stuff like that. And then Grant is staring out the window and he sees something and jumps out of the car while it's still moving, right?
It does indeed. And he runs towards the commotion that's happening, and we get to the next scene.
What about don't forget how Malcolm's like, see? Nobody could have predicted that Alan Grant would move out of a moving vehicle. And then she doesn't give a shit. She's like, shit, I need to go after Alan. And then he's like, and I couldn't have predicted that was going to happen either. And now I'm sat here talking to myself. That's chaos theory.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is, like, he applies chaos, like everything's chaos theory to him. I mean, yeah, some things are chaos theory, but I just feel like he's just throwing it out everywhere now. Like every time something happens, it's like, oh, that's chaos theory. Yeah, that's chaos theory.
Oh God.
Yeah, so now they're running towards the Triceratops,
Right.
and there's a scene where Lex falls over, and then Alan Grant picks her up, and that's when she smiles again and refuses to let go of his hand.
She loves him.
She loves him.
She loves him.
And then we see, we're introduced to our next dinosaur.
The Triceratops.
The Triceratops, which I've got to say, I'm a bit bummed by the whole Triceratops scene.
Why? What's wrong with
it? To me, Triceratops is an awesome dinosaur, and this is the dinosaur that kind of graced all the covers of dinosaur books. You've got
it was like one of the most popular, like.
Yeah, and like every book was T-Rex versus Triceratops, right? Like that was like the ultimate battle: veggie dinosaur versus meat eater. Big animal with like huge jaws fighting thing with 3 horns and lots of protection. Like it was just classic. But we just see this poor Triceratops lying on its side, foaming at the mouth or something, and and then all of a sudden, like, can you imagine, right? If you're sat on the floor, right, you're passed out on the floor and you're ill, and people are just like, lying on your belly and like touching your tongue and stuff like that.
It's funny because I remember thinking that, like, because if you, this is where they meet the vet as well, Dr. Harding, I think his name is.
Yes.
Who I believe the guy who plays him was involved in making the movie as well. He might have been one of the writers or producers or something. I don't remember. But I remember he says, because Ellie asks him what are the symptoms, and one of the symptoms is labored breathing, and then Alan Grant's laying on the poor thing's chest, like, yeah, breathe. This is great. I'm having a great time. And the Triceratops is like, do you mind?
Leave me alone. I'm dying here.
Can't breathe. Oh dear.
But I think one thing that gets me is like, we talk about like how there's so many plants that like people are unaware of, and they've been shouting off about like how this shouldn't happen. Like, we don't know. You don't know the power that you're wielding by bringing all these things that have been extinct and into today's modern world, and we don't know like how the two worlds are going to mesh. Like we don't know how the present day is going to mesh with all this stuff from the past. Yet they're touching all these plants with their bare hands that have never existed before, and they're pulling on dinosaur tongues, which we don't know what reaction that's going to have with like. So on one hand, they're complaining about like not understanding everything, and yet they're just being very carefree with this kind of situation. Like, would you ever put your hand in a dinosaur's mouth?
Probably not.
No,
it doesn't sound like a good idea.
No, especially I know it's a veggie dinosaur, but it's got a sharp beak mouth thing.
It does, yeah, and they could still mess you up. I mean, I'm sure it's not okay with people prodding it and gathering around it and.
Yeah. All that stuff. I mean, you've got cats and dogs. I mean, have you tried to just grab their tongue while they're ill?
Yes, they don't seem to be big fans of it. Okay. But isn't this also because this is part also tells you something about Ellie's character, because she's like, I'm going to help fix this problem. So she's like trying to figure out what's going on, and she's examining the scene. She's checking the Triceratops for symptoms. And then she finds these pebbles, right? And she's looking at the berries. That's it. She's looking at the berries.
One thing that gets me is Grant and Sattler seem to know so much about what's going on, and you kind of think to yourself, Hammond should have hired these people.
Yeah.
The other staff seem to be really incompetent.
Yes. Oh yes.
Like the guy who's like the vet seems to be scratching his head, even though this has been happening to the Triceratops for ages. But so an interesting thing is they kind of cut down that whole scene, because in the book it goes into more detail about like what actually happens. So
yes, yeah.
Because what the vet was saying is that the Triceratops was not eating the berries, so they know they're poisonous, so they couldn't understand why they were getting ill.
Yeah.
And coming back to the pebble thing, it turns out that, they weren't going for the berries. They were going for the rocks that were positioned by the berries, and that they were actually consuming the rocks like birds do to break down the food in their stomach.
Yes.
And then over time, the rocks get smooth and get passed out. And so they go and find more rocks. And that's why the Triceratops kept getting ill in cycles.
Yes, because the berries were getting mixed in with the rocks, right? That
yes.
They were eating.
Exactly.
And I think as well in the book, because this is where I mean, we'll get to it, but this is where it starts to rain and they go back, and I think Ellie stays. There's like a whole side plot where Ellie and the vet go off to find the reason for this. These Triceratops is getting sick, but I don't know if they filmed it and cut it out or if they just didn't bother putting it in.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But you're right. But it's a shame that they had to kind of cut that out, because I think that was quite an interesting scene where you get to know a bit more about Sattler and the way she operates. And
yeah,
I think it's nice to kind of have a bit more explanation of how the dinosaurs behave. I understand that you don't really have all that stuff in the movie, and it would really make the runtime super long. But for nerds like us, I think that would have been quite a nice thing.
Oh, absolutely.
I'd like to see like a Spielberg definitive edition that's like 4 hours long.
Oh yeah, totally watch that. Incredible. So this is also where she says we need to examine the droppings, and he's like droppings, and then like Malcolm, and then I think it cuts to another scene in the control room first.
I think that comes after. I think,
because I thought it cut to a scene in the control room because they were like, "There's a storm coming." And then it cuts back to the Triceratops, and you see Ian Malcolm take his sunglasses off, fold them, and say, "Now that is one big pile of shit,"
which I loved as a kid.
Yeah.
But as an adult, I just love the way he saunters up to the poo.
Like, really, really casual. He can never turn off his like
sleaze.
He just does it all the time.
Like he's even going to flirt with the pile of poo. Like it's just like, yeah, I'm just too cool for school.
So the storm. I mean, like we get the scene. It cuts to the control room just before that, and they're like, "There's a storm coming," and Hammond's like, "Is there anything we can do about this?" And I think it's Arnold who's like, "Nope, there's a storm coming. We're fucked. We're gonna have to close down and pick it up again tomorrow." And then you see Hammond like slam his cane on the floor, and he's like, "Damn!" and that's when it cuts back to the Triceratops again, I think.
Right. And one thing that always got me about the big pile of shit is, how did the dinosaur do that? Like it's about the same size as Ian Malcolm.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. That is either they're all shitting in the same place, or that is from one dinosaur who's having a really bad day.
Are they backing up like a dump truck and just like, adding to the pile as they go along? I'm looking to see like how tall Triceratopses are, so that we can kind of get an idea.
It looks at like the size of an elephant or something, I think, right?
So, yeah, if it's the size of an elephant, then it's still too high, right?
Yeah, that is a lot of poop.
Because I mean, so I'm looking at a size comparison chart here, and the butthole comes about to the shoulder of a man.
I'm so glad we started this podcast. These are the hard details that I live for.
This is the kind of research you want to do. So technically, yeah, I mean, I think I'll have to look for images of that scene. But my search history is going to be quite interesting now. But
so this is where the storm starts to come in, right? And they're like, "We should get back," or something.
Yeah, can you keep talking while I look at how big the pile of poo is?
Okay, if it's that important. I think this is the bit where the storm starts to come in, and then they're like, "Oh, we should get back," or whatever. I think Gennaro comes and says we should be leaving or something like that. The
pile of shit changes size based on what I'm looking at. So I don't know if there's some kind of like
weird
foreshortening that's going on, whether, because it seems like super high in certain scenes, and then when like Sattler's got her arms in it, then it looks a bit smaller.
Oh, maybe it's a perspective thing. I don't know.
I think it's a perspective thing.
Well, I'm glad we know. Glad we figured that out.
Right.
So the storms come in and they're like, right, let's go back. Ellie stays with the vet for a while to figure out that problem. And the rest of them go back to the visitors center.
There was an actual storm that did hit the island at the end of filming. And they actually used that storm the footage of that storm in the film. So when you see the storm footage of coming in, that was the actual footage of the storm on the island. So it was real.
Apparently that was like a devastating storm as well. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere that it ruined massive parts of the island and people died. And then the crew of Jurassic Park helped the locals, pick up the pieces. And they had this, like I remember reading that they had this really good relationship with the local people who lived there, and they like helped them sort of clean up after the storm and stuff.
It's really cool, if
Yeah.
that's the case.
So the storm's coming, they go back to the visitor center, and I can't remember what happens next.
So
Sorry.
this is where Nedry decides to go ahead with his plan to steal the embryos. He starts to nervously chat about getting a drink and starting to offer people if they want a drink, and how he's going to have to take the computer offline for a few minutes to free up some compute cycles to fix stuff.
Yes.
That kind of jazz. And we see him start off his timer. And I really love how he kind of does this, where he's going to press the mouse button, and with his other hand, he's got his hand over his watch to press the start.
Yeah, it's synchronized.
Yeah. That was really, it's a really well filmed shot. I really like
it is.
So he starts off the timer.
Yes.
Shuts down the cameras and goes to... Oh, no, he doesn't shut the cameras. He goes towards the chamber first.
Yes.
In preparation for the cameras to switch off.
He's counting down. He's like 3, 2, 1. And then they shut off and he enters the facility.
He does. And he starts to go through picking out all the individual vials of embryotic material.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure what was supposed to be in there.
No, but the funny thing is, so they've all got labels on it. They misspelled Stegosaurus.
Oh, did they? Oh, yeah. My boy. There's no Steggies in this movie, and it broke my heart. And now they just have to stick the boot in even more.
They did the Stego boys wrong in this one. They really did. I think they had a Stegosaurus toy though. I think
they did. Yeah, you're right, because I had the Stegosaurus toy. I remember that. They did a bunch of dinosaur toys for dinosaurs that weren't in the movie.
Yeah, so I remember, because I think that was like one of our favorites, and we were really looking forward to seeing it in the movie, and it was just like, oh, and when you see, and that's the thing, when you see the vial, you're like, oh, cool, they've got a Stegosaurus. You can't wait to see it, and it's like, oh,
that's a Triceratops. Sorry, I thought you were talking about the other scene with the sick Triceratops.
Oh, no. I'm talking about the...
So, the vials, they spelled it wrong. That sucks.
Now, Nedry has basically shut down the park, so he's got his vials in his Barbasol can, and now
he's covered his ass, though, because he's told his co-workers that some of the systems are going to go offline for a little bit.
And that the phones will go out as well.
Yeah, because he's debugging the system. So he knows that when it starts happening, they're not immediately going to react to it.
Okay. So now we know that Nedry is making his escape from the island, and we're now about halfway into the movie, and this is where things start to go really, really wrong. So yeah, Gavin, I think we're going to need part 2 for this.
Yeah, that seems like a good place to end it. It's about halfway. We've been going on for a while. Yeah. What do you think so far?
So I've got to say, like, for a movie where it takes so long to actually get into the meat of the actual film, it doesn't feel laborious. I think that's another great thing about the movie, is that even the build-up is interesting.
No, it is, yeah. And it's also full of information as well. So it's not just filler. It's not like you just sat there waiting for something to happen. It's building up the suspense. And it's foreshadowing, and it's giving you like little nuggets of information and stuff.
Exactly, and it gives you little bits to kind of get you excited. So the Brachiosaurus and then the Triceratops. Like nothing is a big payoff. Like you think, oh, this is going to be a big thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, the Triceratops is sick. Oh, yeah, you see the magnificent.
all the disappointments and like sort of building up to something when it's not going to be disappointing. It's going to be terrifying.
Exactly. So, Gavin, can you tell our listeners where they can find us?
Yeah, I certainly can. It's High on Retro if you're on Facebook and Twitter. If you're on Instagram, it's High on Retro Pod. You've got to love those social media handles. And if you have anything you want to talk to us about, suggestions for future episodes, or just to verbally abuse us, you can email us at highonretropod@gmail.com.
All lowercase, all one word. Also, correct us for any of the facts that we may have got wrong about Jurassic Park.
Yes.
Or if there's some of the things that we've talked about where, we've got a lot of questions in this movie as well. As much as we love it, there's quite a few things that we don't understand. So if you can fill in those gaps for us, we'd be more than appreciative of the input.
Yeah. And I think hopefully we're hoping that this podcast will sort of develop, and but it's very nice for everybody to listen to our first ever episode, and it's been real fun.
It has.
Do it again.
So we'll hopefully join you all in part 2, but from both Gavin and I, a big thank you, and stay retro.
All right, see ya.
Bye-bye.